Lord, open my lips and speak through them. Open our minds and think through them. Open our hearts and set them on fire. Amen. There are some questions we just don't ask. We don't ask people how much they weigh, how much money they make, or who they voted for. We don't ask because the information is classified as confidential and off bounds. Sometimes we don't ask a question because we think we should already know the answer, and we don't want to appear ignorant. Certain questions can be misperceived as a sign of doubt, a weakness of faith, so better not ask. And we are reluctant to ask questions of people who have heaps of serious trouble, a health crisis, a lost job, a failed marriage. We don't ask because we don't really want to know. We don't want to feel their pain or feed our own fears. But without asking, we can't know a person's needs or make a difference, even if it's just to validate their feelings. Questions are keys to relationships, including our relationship with God. If faith is the belief in things unseen and hoped for, then doubt is an essential component of that relationship, and questions are critical to our spiritual growth. In today's gospel, Jesus speaks to his disciples of his death and resurrection for the second time. And for the second time, they do not understand or know what to say. They fail to follow up with any clarifying questions or engage in any further dialogue. Whatever Jesus means by his talk of death and resurrection, it doesn't sound good. The first time he had raised the subject, Peter had objected, and Jesus responded with a lesson in discipleship. Their assignment? To deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. Sidestepping the burning questions they are afraid to ask, the disciples turn instead to arguing with each other over issues of rank and status. But they have but one question in the forefront of their minds: who is the greatest among them? We may not understand the mystery of prayer, what it does and how it does it, but we all know what happens when we don't pray, when our connection to God is weak. It leads to a cycle of scattered thoughts, bad decisions, and actions we later regret. Seizing a teachable moment, Jesus proceeds with another lesson in discipleship. Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Then taking a little child in his arms, he adds, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. This is how greatness looks in the kingdom of heaven. It is the kind of reverse imagery Jesus uses so often to illustrate how conventional wisdom must be reinterpreted in light of the gospel. Jesus overturns the prevailing assumptions about power and security by creating an image of the abundant life that does not come by gathering power, but by displaying vulnerability. We don't build the kingdom of heaven by collecting powerful friends, but by welcoming and modeling children. We succeed because of our willingness to serve. Jesus says the way to greatness is service. Service was seen by the ancient world as a humble pursuit, and the world still holds that view. The disciples did not understand Jesus' words because they could not imagine, much less accept, a Messiah who was a servant to anyone. It's often the desire for power, authority, and fame that drives people to do extraordinary things. If any or all of these goals are achieved, they feel as though they have arrived and deserve the appropriate homage. Jesus was the greatest man who ever lived, yet he was and is the greatest servant. He came calling lowly fishermen to follow him, disciples whose filthy, undeserving feet he stooped to wash. He made some headlines with his messages and miracles, but he made many more enemies who perceived him as a threat to the status quo that protected the elite and victimized the poor. He died the hardest of deaths, poor and discredited, a pretender to the throne of a kingdom that was not of this world. The word kingdom suggests power, authority, and greatness. But for the disciples of Jesus, true greatness will look more like weakness, defeat, and even death. True greatness is not achieved in triumph, but in surrender. In the kingdom of heaven, we are valued not for our own achievements, but because God deems us worthy of dying for. This is a pretty outrageous and mind-exploding thing he was trying to prepare the disciples for, and so it is for us. The promise of an abundant life does not mean less debt, longer vacations, or more prestige. It means service. God does not measure the greatness of our lives in dollars and cents, in family or friends, in recognition or accomplishments. If you aspire to greatness, give yourself to those small, mundane, easily overlooked needs around you. Show hospitality to the least important people in the world: children, people with disabilities, refugees, the uneducated, and come face to face with the divine. These may seem like small things: serving others, opening yourself up to someone's needs, being honest about your own needs and fears, showing kindness to a child, welcoming a stranger. These are opportunities to build the kingdom of heaven on earth, and they are available to us each and every day. Underneath the words of today's gospel, there are questions about who Jesus is and about the nature of God. If the world we live in is so radically different from the kingdom of heaven, then we must ask questions. If Jesus' death seems pointless or his resurrection is too difficult to accept, we must ask questions. If we wonder how Jesus is present to us or where to find God in times of suffering, then we must ask questions. But we need not fear our questions, our misunderstandings, our confusion, or our curiosity. Intelligence, whether emotional, spiritual, or intellectual, is not measured by how much we know, but by how much we are still willing and able to learn. The deepest mysteries of life elude us, and hard questions usually lead to more hard questions. Yet we must ask them. We should never be afraid to ask Jesus to help us follow, to help us understand the limits of human wisdom, and to help us trust that he will pick up where we leave off. So I encourage you today to claim your questions, own them. They are an important part of faith. True greatness is to be like Jesus. That is what discipleship means, to learn the way of the cross. Jesus welcomes us even when we don't understand, when we don't even know what questions to ask. He invites us to share our struggles and doubts so that we might follow and draw closer in faith and understanding to the countercultural, humble, sacrificial, servant-hearted greatness of the cross of Jesus. Amen.